Okay, good evening. Tonight is the Hanson Board of Selectmen's meeting, and tonight is June 18th at 6 p.m. And we are going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We're about to enter executive session, and to conduct a strategy in preparation for the negotiations with the non-union personnel if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares, to wit, Michael McHugh, Town Administrator, and Meredith Marini. We will also be in executive session to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares, to wit, Michael McHugh, Town Administrator, Meredith Marini, and to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations for collective bargaining sessions with the Hanson Police Relief Association, and the chair has declared that it would be detrimental to conduct such an open session. So with that, we're going to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we need it? Okay.
Second.
Yes. All in favor?
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, great. Good evening. We are reconvening from our executive session. Tonight is Tuesday, June 18th, 2019, and we are now in open session. We're going to get on with the agenda, and first on our new business agenda is vote on an amendment to the town administrator's contract.
I move to vote to amend the town administrator's employment contract. The town and Mr. McHugh have agreed mutually to end the employment relationship. Mr. McHugh has agreed to certain terms to amend his existing employment contract and separate from employment.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion with the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And Jamie, did you want to make a statement for us, and then I have a statement?
Sure. By way of background for the members of the public here, the town administrator had a 4-year employment agreement which was set to run until 2022. Tonight, the board has approved a separation agreement which allows those contractual obligations to fall away. And the agreement now between us and Mr. McHugh is a separation agreement which will end the employment relationship on July 1st. Now, by operational law and as discussed in executive session, these types of agreements have a 7-day revocation period that we would have to wait before it will become completely binding and effective. And because of that term, it is not a public document until it is legally binding and effective. So I would just want to make members of the public aware of that, in the spirit of full transparency, that at that point in time, my understanding is that the board is going to release that as a public document along with the town statement. Correct?
Yep, thank you. And this is a statement on behalf of the board. This board is committed to complete transparency in all matters to the extent permitted by law. That being said, in compliance with state law, it is the policy of the town not to comment on confidential personnel matters and/or ongoing investigations into personnel matters. Because of these constrictions, we have not commented on any action with respect to the town administrator. Mr. McHugh had an employment agreement with the town. There were 3 years left on the existing agreement. At this point, we have a tentative mutual agreement to separate Mr. McHugh from employment effective July 1st, 2019. And again, as Jamie mentioned, by operation of law, these agreements have a revocation period of 7 days. Once that revocation period has expired, the board will release the agreement as a public document. The board looks forward to moving quickly to find a new permanent town administrator and to beginning the next chapter for the town. With that said, we'll move on to the next item on our new business agenda, which is vote on the interim town administrator contract.
I move to vote to enter into an employment agreement between the town of Hanson and Meredith Marini as interim town administrator until such time she is no longer needed. This agreement is subject to minor modifications.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. And next up on the agenda is the Hanson Housing Authority, LZ Thomas Housing, and I believe that, okay, Mr. T-Bone. I don't know if you wanted to take a position up at the microphone, just so other people could hear you and...
So good evening, my name is Tom Tebow. I'm here tonight as the Chief Executive Officer of the Hanson Housing Authority. I thank you for taking the time to listen to what we'd like to do with the LZ Thomas and give any comment that you may have. The LZ Thomas School, Grammar School, is, I believe you taught there at one time.
I attended
Back in 1995 became a public housing complex consisting of 6 units, 2 2-bedrooms, 2 3-bedrooms, and 2 4-bedrooms. It's federally funded through HUD's public housing program. HUD's federal public housing program works on scale. So there's a formula about how much money you get, and it anticipates that you have at least 50 units. It's better if you have over 100 to be able to take care of the capital needs. So we've been struggling to take care of LZ Thomas. And now, in recognition of that, they've given us the opportunity to change the funding stream, to go from what's Section 9 public housing to Section 8 voucher housing. And what it would basically do is double the amount of income that the Hanson Housing Authority would get. It increases it by about $54,000 a year to provide for that complex. Nothing would change as far as the town goes. Hopefully, the place would look better. We'd be able to paint it. The roof needs some help. Those huge, beautiful windows that you looked out as a kid are awful expensive to take care of. We just had one fall apart, and it cost us $1,400 to reconstruct. We get about $10,000 a year to take care of that building. It's just not enough to care for it. Under this new program, the Hanson Housing Authority will be the owner. There will be a deed restriction on affordability. The residents who are there will stay. If they want, they can leave. Unless they go over income, then they have to move out. But as far as the town goes, it would be exactly the same. Part of the process is that we have to engage the community, and that's what we're doing now. If there are any comments, please, contact the Housing Authority about it. But there really should be no change in the program at all. Oh, and what they ask tonight. They ask is that you authorize the town administrator to approve, and I did put a template in here. I know when I'm asked to provide these letters, I like to have a template I could work off to support this change. We would be sending an application in to the Special Application Center with HUD. It's not guaranteed. It is a real estate transaction, so the transaction would take off the declaration of trust that HUD has on the property now, and it would give complete ownership to the Hanson Housing Authority.
I've got a question for you. Does it change whether or not, if this is, adopted, would it change who is given preference to housing or anything of that sort? In short, I'm asking, are Hanson residents given preference to that now, and would they be under this change?
They are, and they will be, yes.
Okay.
Nothing will change there. The federal government gives you quite a bit of flexibility in your preferences, so that won't change at all.
Okay. Did anybody else
I have a
have any
question.
other?
Thanks for the question and answers, because that answered actually most of my questions in there. But I do have one question. Does this apply to any other Hanson Housing Authority property?
No, this is, and this is law to me. So I came associated with the Hanson Housing Authority in 2015, but apparently this was going to be part of the state public housing program back in 1995, and something went wrong. And Senator Kennedy's office stepped in, and they made it into a public housing property, a federal public housing property. So I don't know what went wrong. I can tell you, I'm sure it solved a short-term problem. It created a long-term problem because of the scale again. But I believe this will get a long ways to solving that. Once the Hanson Housing Authority owns the property, they can also go to the bank with that. So just like you would go to the bank with your home, if you had to do improvements there, we could go and take a loan against the property.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Did anybody want to, I'll entertain a motion?
So moved.
to allow Mary to draft a letter of support and enter into an agreement, I believe is what.
To draft a letter of support for
Okay,
the
all right.
application.
And he provided the letter in
Yeah.
this too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so moved.
Second.
okay.
Oh, sorry, no.
All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next up is vote to award the bids for the June 12th tax possession auction. Mary, did you want to cue that up for us?
Sure. We had a very successful auction. Before you was a list of the auction successful bidders, and we can just run through the list, and the locations, not it will really be terribly helpful to most of the people listening, but the first parcel that was sold was on Monpont Street, parcel 7, 1634, to Michael Curtin in the amount of $63,000. Second one was Union Park Street, parcel 2, map 2, parcel 276, to Jacqueline Foley, in the amount of $500, which was the deposit amount. Another lot on Union Park Street, 2-208, to Richard Omar for $500. Leon Court, Lot 2, parcel 10, to David Layton, $500. French Street, map 6, lot 21, Daniel Wigmar, $500. Santos Court, map 7, lot 53, Frederick Tavares. Roller Coaster Road, map 79, lot 38, Michael Curtin, $61,000. Baker Street, map 15, lot 9, Audrey Flanagan, $3,500. Monpont Street, map 7, lot 1637, to Denise Mack for $1,000. And 2 lots we did not get any bids for, and that was on Whitman Street and on Cross Street. Fortunately, most of these lots went to abutters, so they were able to pick up a little extra real estate, if that's what you want to call it. And we were very happy with the process, and we hope to be closing by the middle of July. We have 30 days to close, and the tax title attorney is getting together with all the successful bidders to get that moving ahead. I believe we may have to have a vote to authorize me to sign whatever deeds are done, but I'll check with council at that and find out what we need to do.
And Jim, did you have any questions you wanted to ask? Like, when is the next auction coming up?
I
I'm just
was-
guessing.
Actually, well,
I was gonna
checked.
wait,
I know,
but-
I checked. We do have just a couple of lots. We've really made a good dent in what we have. Some of them are just smaller parcels, but we may have 2 or 3 larger parcels that we can sell. So I'll sit down with the assessor and the treasure collector in the next couple of weeks and go through that list. But it's not, we really made a good dent in what we've
Now,
had
was
out
the
there.
assessor happy with all these numbers? Because I know the last time, there was a couple
Yeah.
of properties that she wasn't happy.
Yeah,
She is.
these are, like I said, these are very small pieces.
Right, okay.
$500 was a good bid, and we were very happy with this. The 63,000 on Montpont Street was very good. We did not expect to see Roller Coaster Road go so well.
Wow, good.
So we're quite pleased with that.
And I just wanted to say thank you, Mary, because I do appreciate it, and I think, there, like you said, there's just a few left, which will bring it down to 0, if not close to it.
Yes.
Which
And-
is a far cry from where we were when we first started, and so everybody's been chipping away, and we do
Yep.
appreciate it. 'Cause
Yeah, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work just for the staff, but with respect to tax title attorney to do all these deeds, and some of these are just a nightmare. So it's good. They're back on the rolls, and we'll get something out of it.
Thanks.
All right. Any discussion, questions, Mary, on that? Okay.
So I need a vote to accept the, award the bids.
So I move to award the bids for the June 12th tax possession auction.
Second.
All in favor? All right, great. Moving along, we will be voting to accept donations, and it does say donations plural, but it's actually one. And in your packet, you would have the Hanson Recreation Commission voted to accept a donation of $1,130 that was received from the Pembroke Chamber of Commerce on 4/10/19 for that Breakfast with the Easter Bunny event that they held at Camp Kiwanee. So do I have a motion to accept that donation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Recreation Commission, business plan, discussion and introduction of the Recreation Director. I have a little statement I want to make, just to set the rules of engagement. So next up is a discussion about the Recreation Commission business plan and introduction of the new Recreation Director. I know that the topic of Camp Kiwanee can be an emotional one. Before we get into this discussion, I want to let you know that we will not be discussing the enterprise account in any depth tonight. FinCom has proposed eliminating that account, and discussions between FinCom, Recreation, and the Board of Selectmen to address the future of the Recreation Commission's enterprise fund will be happening shortly. But since they have not happened yet, it would be premature and unproductive to discuss them tonight. In addition, I want to be clear about our rules of engagement for this discussion. This board is supportive of the work the current Recreation Commission is doing, and we recognize that there have been some obstacles along the way that have hindered them from making the progress they would have liked to have made so far. I would like to reiterate what I said at last night's Recreation Commission meeting, that the time has come for all who love Camp Kiwanee to come together for the greater good and to put any differences behind them. To that end, I have asked the Recreation Commission to come before us tonight to focus on the future of Camp Kiwanee. It is not our intention to exhume bodies this evening. So with that, I will turn it over to, I don't know who's speaking first. Billy? Okay. Okay.
My podium?
Please,
or-
please.
Okay.
Are you going to do a short stand-up routine before you start this evening, or?
I don't know that I have anything
Okay.
appropriate.
We'll give you more notice the next time.
Where I only started June 3rd. I haven't really gone looking for the bodies either, so.
You don't have enough material yet.
But my guess is they're probably somewhere out past the softball field there. I don't know. I'll keep exploring. So I guess, yeah, as an introduction, hi everybody. Bill Boyle, your new Recreation Director for Camp Kiwanee. Do you guys want background of where I came from, or?
Please.
Sure, okay.
But,
So I.
with respectfully, briefly, we have quite a jam-packed agenda
I
tonight. And I
understand.
do mean that with
And
all due
they always
respect.
say to be
Yeah.
appreciated, be
Okay.
brief, so.
Okay.
I guess the abridged version, so I am a Pembroke native, so I grew up right over on Little Sandy. So again, a very, close community over there. I've grown up in the political sphere. My dad's been a long-running selectman. I have volunteered on Pembroke Recreation, Community Preservation, and was elected to Housing Authority. So I have some background in the public sector, although this is my first time working in the public sector. I was always in the private sector, much in hospitality. I ran my own financial services business for 6 years. I was a brand manager for an Irish whiskey company. So I guess I have been involved with recreation for some time, although whiskey tends to be a different type of recreation.
You're gonna need it.
Well, as long as it's once I'm done for the day.
Oh, boy.
Not going to touch that one. But anyway, I am looking forward. As I said, I started June 3rd. The fact that I get to walk out and I have such a beautiful office as, Camp Kiwanee. I'm looking forward to the future, to everything that, the camp has to offer, all the potential that's there. I'm just interested in obviously working with the commission, working with the board and obviously all the departments. In order for everything to happen successfully, we need to work together. And that's what I'm looking to be, is just another team member to make sure we can get it to where it needs to be. So I'm looking forward to that, and I know I've got great support in our commission, in Lon, in Emma, so they've been showing me the ropes and helping me along, and I'm getting acclimated as quickly as possible, and looking forward to, bringing some more fun to the camp and to the community as a whole. So,
Well, we welcome you. We're thrilled to have you.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thrilled to be here.
Did anybody have any questions?
As long as they're easy.
Okay, great. With that, I'm not sure, Diane, are you going to be queuing up, or is Billy going to be doing
Yeah,
that?
that's.
Okay.
Unless, do you want me to, do you want to defer to, am I allowed to speak as a
Yes.
behalf of us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So part of obviously our plans, our goals for Kiwanee, obviously looking at, I guess first and foremost, organization. So creating a schedule, creating a calendar, so we know what's going on up here in terms of town meeting, when budgets are needed, when deadlines for things like grants and things are needed for paperwork. because obviously there's plenty of things that, need to be done up at the camp, and with the help of grants and things available, it'll certainly make that work, much more expeditious. So by having that calendar and also outlining events and programs that we're looking to do, it's really going to give us the foresight to know when the preparation needs to happen, when the advertising and promotion needs to happen, and then when we actually need to have the event. Again, looking at creating a 5-year capital improvement plan, I know some things have been put forth before, but again, we're going to look to probably revamp that a little bit. I have been working to prioritize, building and ground maintenance, working with the caretakers to find out, what's needed, and how we can go about working with.
I will jump in on that.
Please do.
We did talk to the Conway School, and they are the people that did the Plymouth County Hospital plan. And they have said they would like to work with us at the camp as well. So they were trying to get us on the agenda on their spring 2020 schedule. Don't think it's going to happen until spring of 2021 because it is a $10,000 fee for them to come out and give a comprehensive
I
landscape.
think it's kind of competitive, too.
And it's very
Yeah.
competitive, although he seemed pretty excited to work with us because of the erosion issues and things like that at the camp. And it covers checks some of their boxes for those things that they need to adhere to.
Yeah.
And waterfront very much excites them. So,
Well, that's exciting, because I think we've had a pretty good experience with them, Matt, right, with the Plymouth County Hospital reuse, so
we have.
that's exciting.
So on the up and up. No, I'm glad because again,
That just happened this morning.
yeah. No, that's good to know. In addition, obviously along with the capital improvement plan, looking at how we can take those priorities and couple them with grant opportunities, coordinate with other town departments to work on issues and projects. Because obviously, especially with departments like highway and things, there's plenty of things that need to be done. So obviously, we're just, again, a cog in the wheel. We need to work together to make sure things are done timely and obviously in accordance with other things that need to be handled. So obviously, a big thing, increasing recreational programming. So at least looking at this point, just not to get lofty with goals, but just to set something in place, at least a program a month, so that, again, we can start to advertise that we're, bringing people in to have different activities, movie nights, kickball, what have you. Along with that, increasing lodge rentals. I know, weddings kind of tend to be down, but events are up. So again, balancing that, lodge space rental with, again, more weddings, more events, corporate family parties. Obviously, it's going to happen with planning and strategy, and as our business and exposure increases, and people are coming to us more to participate with these activities, it'll be some of that organic growth as well. So we're obviously hoping to kind of hit that head on and really just have all that working together. Along with that, looking at hosting a community event or after hours, at least, looking maybe once a quarter, every 2 months. Again, just to continue to build community and just, again, put that goodwill and that faith back out there in the camp. And with that, I know most of the focus is on, Camp Kiwanee itself, but especially as a recreational department and program, going outside the Kiwanee sphere as well and looking at creating rec activities and events for other places within the community. So maybe in places like the COA, working with them to put on certain things, in that route.
Yeah, that's great, and we've touched upon it as a board, but we've never really gotten into depth with it, that, the Recreation Commission has been rather narrowly defined although it's still quite a bit, as Camp Kiwanee, but we definitely have had a lot of feedback about expanding beyond that. But what we need to really explore and talk about more broadly as a board, and then obviously with Recreation Commission with you, is, does that happen under the umbrella of Recreation Commission? Do we call that something else? Do we have a subcommittee that's Camp Kiwanee and then, Recreation? We don't want to over-engineer it or kill an ant with a cannon, but we definitely want to be thoughtful about the way we're doing it. We don't want to suddenly, say baptism by fire for everybody that was on the Recreation Commission. You're now in charge of all recreation for the entire town, which isn't really what we had originally said to them. So we sort of touched upon it, but it's definitely something this board has expressed a desire to explore more fully. So we'll definitely bring everybody in and have that conversation.
Kind of like in What About Bob, with the baby steps, but again, we gotta take the steps and then make it happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
it's kind of, did we have anything?
Just increasing the volunteerism.
Oh, and then, obviously, yeah, increasing volunteerism within the community, and that'll happen once we have more events, that we can get more volunteers and just bring everybody together.
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you. Did anybody have any questions? No?
Nope.
Mr. Young?
I don't want to hit you with too many things, but about 3 years ago, our board agreed to finally set up a 21st century accounting program for the camp, so you could track all of your rentals up to date, and you would know exactly what your rentals were today, what the rentals were under contract by type.
Yep.
Which would give you the advantage of having a customer base, so you could have promotions for repeat rentals, et cetera, et cetera. So you could track everything just like we track all the tax bills, all the water bills, and you could track all the rentals.
Sure.
And all it would take is a simple accounts receivable program, and so you could modify it to track all the rentals by type, by date, and when all the rentals are going to actually take place, and actually track your rentals to date and compare it to the previous year. I mean, it makes sense.
So is the question, do we have that, or
No,
are we
I'm
gonna
just saying,
get it? or-
I think that should be part of one of your goals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
As well as going over the budget.
Yeah, well,
Getting
that's
much
what we
more
got.
familiar.
I got a good friend in Todd, and we're gonna hit that budget, and I'll know it front to back. So
I'd vote to put a couple of water slides up in the lodge that go down the hill.
I've heard that was a thing at some point. We will take it under advisement.
Good
I believe
answer.
we can put it on the
Good
agenda.
answer. Not on the agenda, not the right
Yeah,
meeting,
so
but
we
yeah.
We'll talk to town council, see what those ramifications are, and
We'll check our insurance.
No, people have said that before, like a water park type of thing, or like the water slides, like, it is pretty big. I know, you're gonna take that under advisement, so.
well, I think
you know.
that's probably the best answer.
That is the absolute
Although I
most
would be
diplomatic answer
pretty
you could
pumped
give.
for a while.
I'm sorry, I just have one question, and I know you've only been there for 2 weeks. Is there anything planned for the summer, whether,
Event-wise, or?
yeah. I
There
was
is,
thinking adults, like.
well, there's a few different things possibly on the horizon. There's obviously kind of the hatchling that happened last night that we may look at trying
It's
to do.
information.
Yeah, it's possibly doing, a camp out for Kiwani, which would certainly be adult and family oriented. I certainly would like to probably have, more live music and stuff there. Again, part of it is me understanding what we can and can't do, and, again, what's allowed and how we go about setting things up. So
Right.
I do have, a good amount of ideas, and it's just the matter of how we do it correctly and, in the right process. 'Cause I want to make sure the right paperwork's filed and we're talking to the right departments, and if
It
we
all
need-
starts with Mary.
Yeah,
She's the
and-
gatekeeper, and she can tell you yay or nay.
I
Yep.
try to be in here at least once a day to at least ask her some sort of question, because I know she always has the answer, and if not,
Not sure she'll want to see you once a day.
yeah, I'll keep it
But he's
to,
been pretty regular, I gotta say.
yeah, eventually I'll probably have my own time slot, like, listen, you can't come by until, 10:15, 10:30, but, no, I mean, everybody's been very welcoming so far, and, just willing to help with any, questions, so, I do appreciate everybody being there to help, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody, so.
All right, thank you.
I
And
hope that wasn't too
Yeah.
long-winded.
thank- Yes, sir. Your name and address, please?
Benjamin Fletcher on High Street. I'm also a member of the Hanson Rod and Gun Club. Each year we have a fishing derby. Usually we hold it here at the Town Hall Pond. This year there was a couple of safety concerns that were needing to be addressed. Some folks were sitting in their lawn chairs up in Route 58. So we figured it may be best to find another location so nobody gets struck, things like that.
Yeah.
So I went to the rec meeting, and this fine gentleman a few weeks ago and proposed the idea of having the fishing derby there next year. So we're actually going to be having that there next year as well.
That's great. It's a wonderful event, and, you know, we're fortunate to have you guys do it every year. We thank you for it, and I think it would be great up there.
I think it
Yeah.
would be too. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I checked with the chief as well. He said as far as safety goes, that's fine. It's accessible for them and stuff too.
I think Chief's gonna have the day off that day so he can come fishing with us, so.
One
Yes.
quick comment, Corinne Capato, Winslow Drive. The library holds their annual trivia night at the end of July.
I've heard of that, yeah. I hear it's awesome.
Draws quite a crowd. I don't think I've seen any children there. Just adults.
Oh,
Cash
that-
buy.
that's fine by me.
I'll be there.
It is quite an event, and actually, we will be announcing that in our announcements. But you'd have to stay till the end of the meeting to hear it, so you'll have to take our word for that. Okay, great.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mr.
Thanks,
Boyle,
Boyle.
we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for coming, we appreciate it. Okay. Next up is an item that I had asked to have placed on this agenda, which is the discussion of the selectmen's role in recreational marijuana cultivation, manufacturing, and testing facilities. And again, I want to read a brief statement. I've asked our counsel, Kate Feodoff, to attend tonight's meeting to clarify the selectmen's roles and responsibilities with respect to the licensing of a proposed marijuana cultivation facility in Hanson. She will also be bringing us up to speed on next steps and timing. This discussion is the first discussion we have had as a board regarding the proposed cultivation facility since learning of their intent to locate here. This discussion is happening in an open meeting, and this board is fully committed to transparency. After the board has had all of its questions and concerns addressed, I will open up the discussion to include questions from the audience. Please note, we will only entertain questions that relate to the topics we have posted on our meeting agenda. And while I realize that people may feel strongly for and against the legalization of marijuana and the recreational use of marijuana, that falls outside of the scope of our discussion tonight, and it is something that has been decided at a state level. As such, I respectfully ask that anyone asking a question stick to questions pertaining to the licensing process in general, the licensing process in Hanson, and the roles and responsibilities of the selectmen in the licensing process for a marijuana cultivation facility. We will have future discussions, which we will open up to the public, that will be more detailed about things you may be interested in that we're not discussing tonight. With that, I'll turn it over to Kate.
Hello, thank you so much. So, yeah, tonight we're talking about, first of all, implementing what the town meeting passed in terms of a general bylaw, the licensing structure. So similar to alcohol licenses, where you get a liquor license for your package stores or for your bars or restaurants that sell alcohol. The town of Hanson opted to enact a bylaw which gives them similar kinds of licensing authority, so it would be renewable annually. But in order to achieve that, you need, number one, an application, and number two, rules and regulations governing what your oversight should and should not be. So that's the first piece. Secondarily, the board, and we'll get into this a little bit more detail, will be able to negotiate a host community agreement with any marijuana establishments that are trying to site in the town of Hanson. But going back to the board, as a license, a local licensing authority, I prepared rules and regulations for the board's consideration relative to these types of establishments. And again, because there is a prohibition in marijuana of retailers, this just applies to your cultivators, so the folks that grow the marijuana, the manufacturers, the folks that convert the marijuana flower to products, and the testing facilities, which are testing sites to check for purity, etc. So these regulations set out the purpose, and again, it's regulation, the authority by which the Board of Selectmen can promulgate these regulations. It sets out some definitions, like your employee, what a license is, what a licensee is, etc. Again, it applies to marijuana cultivators, testing facilities, and product manufacturers pursuant to 94G, which is 94G is the chapter which governs recreational marijuana. So important for you all is that marijuana, I think this is a valuable tool. The marijuana regulations are to be kept on site. The employees who are working in the establishment are required to read these regulations, understand the regulations, agree to abide by the regulations. And I've required an attestation from each employee once it becomes up and running, where they indicate that they've done all those things. It limits admission to the premises, so certain areas in a marijuana establishment are limited to the public. I mean, in cultivation, product manufacturer, testing facility, the public is generally not going in these facilities, but should someone from the public come in, I've referenced the CMRs, which are the Code of Massachusetts regulations governing marijuana, and what those limitations should be, and the marijuana companies have to abide by that. And of course, you have to abide by building occupancy codes. In addition, I've given the Board of Selectmen the opportunity to set the hours of operations. Now, for cultivators, this tends to be more, it runs pretty much all day and all night because you have your fans running and you have your lights running periodically. There are operational needs that I am not as familiar with as the people who run the establishment are, but they'll come to you and request, certain hours to operate, and perhaps you can do employee hours, perhaps you allow the machinery to continue to run. That's up to you. But that's really important because it's a lot more flexible to include it in the license, since it's something that can be noticed. And if there has to be something that changes relative to the hours, you can modify it fairly easily rather than building that into an agreement, a contract, where then you have to modify the contract and execute it and all of those things. So I think it's really helpful to have that in the license requirements. The physical premises. The physical premises, similar to an alcohol establishment, cannot be changed without approval of the board. This is also important, so you know what's going on there. You know that they're not only complying with what the security measurements are, or security protections that they've agreed to abide by, but they're not making any major changes without your knowledge, because that might impact your decision as to whether or not you want to issue them a license or maintain their license. Again, you're asking for it to be kept in a clean and sanitary condition. Now, this is duplicative in some sense of what the Board of Health will be investigating and keeping an eye on, but it also it gives several layers of enforcement and oversight. It discusses interior and exterior lights, and namely that they have to conform to the security plan and to the special permit. Other things that are important, some of this stuff is sort of boilerplate, but we don't want to allow any disorder, disturbance, or violation of state or local law on the premises. Obviously, you're dealing with product that's sensitive, and you want to ensure that there's no diversion, etc. So this allows an enforcement tool, should something to occur, an enforcement tool to be vested in the Board of Selectmen. It provides an inspection provision so that the board, typically this would be your police officers, can appoint inspectors to go in and take a look if there's been a complaint by the public that something is not seeming to be on the up and up. It makes it an express mandate of the marijuana establishment to call the police, to report to the police, to cooperate with the police should anything go awry. In addition, this sets out the hearing requirements. So per these regulations, the marijuana establishments are required, prior to this board entertaining a license application, they're required to notify abutters within 500 feet, so it's even more generous than what you do in the context of zoning, and to advertise. Again, any reports that need to be filed are to be filed with the police and the town administrator. So if there is a diversion, for example, and they're required to notify the CCC, they're also required to notify the town so that we're kept in the loop of anything going awry. Permission to close the premises. Now, this is also common in the alcohol context that, and why is it important? Because you don't want any marijuana unattended in a business that's not operating. So they're required to notify the board. There's a buffer there. So, for example, if they close or shut down operations to do inventory or something that's in the normal course of business, but it's not a true closure, they don't have to notify them. So there's a little buffer. But if they're physically closing for a longer period of time than a week, they have to notify the Board of Selectmen. Notify of bankruptcy.
Can we, on the bankruptcy, and one of the things that I'm concerned about is if we were to move forward with this.
Sure.
Are they able to just transfer ownership to somebody we haven't vetted or felt comfortable with or entered into an agreement with? What is our role in that?
So, part of that is spelled out in the host community agreement. So you can define that by the host community agreement by saying this agreement itself can't be transferred. So, and as some of you may or may not know, a host community agreement, unlike other businesses that operate in town, are required for any and all marijuana establishments. So without a host community agreement in effect, you can't operate. So you can put a non-transferability clause in a host community agreement. You could modify it to something a little softer to say, subject to approval by the Board of Selectmen with notice and, not unreasonably withheld or something like that. There are all sorts of options to protect the town, because part of this is to ensure that you are selecting the partner
Right.
in this venture that you're undertaking. So some folks are absolutely not. We can't transfer. Other folks say, well, we want to be able to convert the terms, but we want to ensure that we have some oversight of who is actually stepping in the shoes. If you wanted to also include language in these regs about non-transferability of the license or transferability of the license subject to approval by the Board of Selectmen, I certainly can add that language as well.
Okay.
Management. This is another piece that they have to notify the town and provide the town with contact information for the on-site manager. It can't be a person who's, in Kansas or something. They have to be physically present and really operating the business, because you need to be able to know who to contact in the event of emergency, fire or otherwise. It discusses complaints, and any complaints that the board receives may be investigated. And then, of course, after an investigation, there could be a decision on the license. So it provides for a revocation, suspension, modification of the terms of the license, etc. Verbal warnings, training, whatever is appropriate in the circumstance. It indicates that what could be violations. So violations of these regulations rather, if you chose to promulgate them. Violations of local or state law. Violations of other bodies' regulations, so like the Board of Health. Violations of the host community agreement. Fraud. All these kinds of things could bring an entity that's operating in town back before the Board of Selectmen to have a discussion. Suspension orders, this is sort of similar to alcohol, where if the license is suspended, they're required to post on their building, say per order of the Board of Selectmen, this entity is no longer in operation for this period. And that's really the long and the short of it. In addition, I've given you an application form which contains the pertinent information, the contact information, the name of the company, etc., to process the application.
Now, Kate, can you tell us, we know that the company that's proposing to locate here has held one, I think what would constitute one, although they've attempted to do more than one, but one that I think the CCC would probably consider acceptable, public outreach meeting. What are the moving parts? What are the steps? What are the timelines?
Yeah, so there are a lot of steps, and there are the folks that are trying to cite have different paths that they have to follow all at the same time. So the community outreach meeting is a requirement in order for them to file an application with the CCC. So in order to file an application of intent, which would, if it goes successfully, provide them with a provisional license, they need a community outreach meeting, and they also need a document which certifies that they've signed a host community agreement with the town. They haven't gotten there yet. As a matter of sheer fact, they approached the town administrator a while back, and the town administrator contacted me because I've negotiated a lot of these contracts with various companies. And so the way I think it works best is to, through counsel to counsel, lawyer to lawyer, work out some of the broader details. So I ensure there are all kinds of protections built in for the town. Again, notice requirements. It's almost duplicative of what we have here with the rules and regulations. Notice requirements. What happens if they fail to pay? All kinds of things. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about a cultivator, a manufacturer, a testing facility? So I can work out the broader details and then come to the board and talk about, let's finalize the terms here. And I think the board can then question me. Why did you put this provision in there? What do you think? Is that helpful? Have you thought of all these other things that might be important to the town and town specific? And then the critical piece is negotiating the community impact payments, which is a revenue source for the town to deal with the impacts that may be created by this entity and built in by law.
Now, are we able to put things in the host agreement that address things like most efficient use of water? Chemicals that are being used and making sure that it's as organic as possible. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but like those types of things, how much can we influence those types of?
So it varies from town to town, to be frank. So in some towns, a lot of that would be addressed in the special permit granting authority process. So when you get you need a special permit in the town of Hanson to cite a marijuana establishment. So that's a whole nother licensing type hurdle that they have to go through. So so sometimes the special permit granting authority delves into some of the more technical details, but things like water, which are really precious to the town of Hanson and the Board of Selectmen may have a vested interest, certainly can be a topic of negotiation in a host community agreement.
Okay. All right, but you'll lay that out at some point. We'll see that. You'll tell us what our ability to influence, what we can influence and what we potentially can't really influence. And
Exactly. There are some constraints that are prescribed by the statute. So, there's an issue of community impact payments. The legislation says that they should exist for 5 years. Some folks interpret that to mean that at the end of 5 years you can negotiate new community impact payments. Other lawyers believe that to mean that after 5 years that's non-negotiable and it's a zero payment. It's something that the legislature likely will iron out and clarify, or case law will clarify for sure. But we have mechanisms built into our agreements that we draft to ensure that we capture as much of an economic benefit as feasible under the statute.
Matt, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Kate, I know in other communities that are going through this process, and even here in Hanson, there have been concerns of non-transparent transactions or meetings and whatnot. So I have like a two-part question. My first part is, can you specify the bare minimum that the town of Hanson is on the hook for making sure that we're posting these meetings for the public to know?
So in terms of negotiating the host community agreement, once that comes to you as a body, obviously you can't deliberate privately and say, I like this provision, I don't like this provision. You have to do that publicly. So that's just an open meeting law compliance issue, and you have to post 48 hours.
Are you talking about that, or are you talking about the public outreach?
Like public outreach slash, you know what I mean, just making sure that we're above board.
What is our
And
role
what is our
in
role?
communicating about the public outreach?
Regarding, so for example,
Thank you,
on the
Laura.
community outreach meetings, okay. Sorry, I was going in a different direction. Yeah, so that's not your responsibility at all. You can facilitate the process because you obviously know this is an important issue to your constituents and to the residents of the town. So you can facilitate that process, sure, but it's not your obligation. So if there were a marijuana establishment that failed to comply with the notice requirements for a community outreach meeting, that's on them. And they won't get through the CCC unless they properly post in accordance with the CCC regulations. So, but certainly you can facilitate that process and you can make an announcement. I know, just like you do for the Council on Aging or something similar.
Okay, we potentially may have been given slightly different feedback on that in the past. So that's good to know, that I think we were told that we ought not to be viewed as either in favor of it or advocating for it, or just sort of try to be as neutral as possible until it actually came up to the vote. So you're saying that we could announce that?
You know, because these community outreach meetings are for proponents and for opponents. They're to voice your opinion on how you think this business is going to affect the town. And so it's not an approval process, though. I don't want to mislead you, because they don't have to get a vote from the folks that show up to the community impact meeting. It's not an approval process. But rather it's to say, you know, I live down the street from, you know, on 29 Main Street or whatever, and I know that the traffic is difficult, and I'm concerned that your delivery trucks are going to interfere with the traffic, and let them know. And frankly, they want to hear the negative just as much as the positive, because the negative helps them to prepare for their other applications, so they can make a plan that would be more acceptable to the residents. In my estimation, if I were working for them, I would want to know what the opponents had to say.
And then I guess my follow-up question on this would be, do you have a recommendation on best practices for this kind of outreach for the town of Hanson?
For you to do specific outreach?
Well, for their public outreach.
Well, right,
Yeah.
just best practices, just to make sure that everything is.
So I wouldn't hazard to advise them on how they should proceed, but I would say, so if someone were to ask me just a hypothetical and not a particular company, because I couldn't advise them, there's community outreach guidance that the CCC has promulgated, and it really sets out the steps of what the publication requirements are, what you're supposed to invite the public to come and voice their opposition or position in favor. So, and it's a one-page document. It's easily accessible on the CCC website.
Thank you.
I do.
Mary,
Actually, I know they're going to be doing an outreach at the library on the 27th. They had checked with me to see if there are any available times using the Selectmen's Meeting room, because it gets them just a little more leverage with having the cable here. So they will be using the Selectmen's Meeting room on July 2nd for another outreach.
Oh, July 2nd. I don't know. I thought you just said June 27th.
The 27th at the library,
Yep.
and then they'll have another one here in the Selectmen's Meeting room on the 2nd.
So they're having another two.
They're having another two, and I think they've had two. They had one here, and I thought they had another one maybe at the senior center.
I think they've had two.
But I believe they did have some
believe
problem
that,
with a posting issue they
Yeah,
had.
I believe, Kate, did their attorney tell you that the first meeting they weren't going to submit to the CCC?
Yeah, it was, you know, they they're well aware that that one wouldn't be acceptable to the
Right.
CCC.
So I gave them a couple of dates, and they requested the 2nd of July so they can meet the meeting posting requirements of 7 days or 10 days or something. So they're just putting everyone on notice that they will be here on the 2nd of July.
Yeah, and the public, I mean, just so you know, this is such a open process because they'll have the host community agreement here with this board. They'll have the license hearing with this board. They'll have a special permit hearing, which has a whole nother set of advertising and posting requirements. And that special permit hearing is gonna talk about number one, security. It's a big concern. That's actually going to go through the police chief because what we really don't want to have happen is we give you the schematic of every security camera so I know exactly how to put on my cat suit and get out there. So we don't want them burgled. So, but they'll talk about some of the odor control, for example. For cultivators, odor control and smell are the biggest issues that the special permit granting authorities tackle. And typically that requires a whole host of documents which will have engineering relative to what their HVAC system is going to look like, what their noise mitigation systems are going to look like because they have fans going all the time, So, and these folks that run marijuana businesses really have a good handle on, typically, have a good handle on what's required to make it so you don't know they're there.
So they're coming with this proposal, and of course, we're not the experts here, okay? They're the experts. So are we able to hire somebody at their cost, but of our choosing, to look at their schematics, to look at what they're saying, what they're proposing, to make sure, and I'm not saying that they would be less than above board or clear or anything of that sort, that they're attempting to mislead us, but I'm a trust but verified type of gal, so I would want to be able to say, we've looked at that, we've verified independently that what you're saying is in fact how it's going to work. Are we able to do that?
Super good question, and the answer is absolutely yes, and it's called peer review, and that's actually routine in this kind of process, the land use side of the town government. So any time you have a development, whether it be a power plant or something that would create an impact. I mean, maybe your convenience store. Actually, a convenience store might even have engineering because they have a traffic impact study, right? So they have all these studies, and then we have the opportunity for a peer review. So we make sure our engineer looks at it and confirms their engineer's findings. Okay. Yes. And not payable by the town of Hanson, which is also good.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, guys? Any questions? Yes, Mr. Young, I would ask you to keep it brief. Yep.
I'm still smiling, Bruce.
That's perfect. You have a very nice smile. Under the state marijuana law, as you know, the town can limit the number of retail recreational marijuana establishments to 20%
of the number of liquor stores.
Yeah. I was just wondering, is there any limitation on the other categories, being cultivators, testing labs, processors, manufacturers? Does that come under the same type of limitation, or
yeah,
is the sky the limit?
That's a really good question, and the answer is the legislation is silent as to whether or not you can limit it. So, and I want to be clear to what the legislation says on retailers. It says that if you regulate, so to put a limit below 20% of your alcohol licenses, then you have to do the dual process of ballot and bylaw, okay? And you may have had to do it anyway, depending upon your initial vote, but that's the distinction. So you could also say 20% was resulted in 3 marijuana retailers. You could say, I only want 1 retailer in town because that's all we can handle, but it would just trigger a different kind of requirement to pass that kind of legislation. Okay, so number 1. Number 2, there's no express requirement that towns do that dual ballot bylaw vote for the other kind of passive activities. And I think the reason why the legislation is different, I'm guessing, which maybe I shouldn't guess in what was driving the legislature, but I think they felt like those towns who were hesitant about marijuana were probably most hesitant about retailers, and they wanted to ensure there was access, so they wanted retailers spread out all through the state, whereas they kind of care less about whether or not there's a cultivator in every part of the state. So the answer to that question is yes. And what I was thinking, if someone wanted to do that, I would do it likely by general bylaw, a limitation on the numbers, and do it through a licensure process through the Board of Selectmen. So say, only 3 licenses are available for cultivators, or whatever the number is going to be. Now, what towns more typically do, and I have seen a town do that, and it was passed by the Attorney General. So, but what is more typical for these kind of passive activities is to craft your zoning bylaw in such a way so the impact is spread out, and there's less opportunity then too. So if you have, your buffers, so you obviously have your school buffers, you have but other communities have done other buffers too, and then you won't have a big concentrated area of all marijuana cultivators or something that you may or may not like. Maybe you like that, but maybe you don't. So that is the more typical response to limiting marijuana cultivators and manufacturers, et cetera, but you can do it by number as well.
Okay, thank you, Kate. I thought I saw, oh, yes, sir, Mr. Fletcher.
Yes, Benjamin Fletcher, High Street, Hanson here. Like Mr. Dyer had stated, there's been some concerns in town. I myself have no opinion. Either way, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other to me. With that said, there were some concerns that folks have brought up to myself in discussion. I was hoping that I could ask these questions. One of the questions being, according to General Law 94G, it states establishments, which is an umbrella term.
Yes.
There was an expectation of some of the townspeople that when we went to vote on this, it was in regards to establishments. It turns out that it was in regards to strictly recreational marijuana.
Mr. Fletcher, I'm going to give you a bit of latitude here, but I did start off by saying that we're going to really stick to the selectmen's roles, the process, and really not going back and going over past votes and all of that. So I'm giving you a bit of latitude, but I'm also giving a bit of a warning.
Within respect,
Okay.
This is the first time I've ever been here.
Okay.
I have no idea really what's gone up until this point. It's a general question. I believe I have the right to ask that question.
Actually, as the chair, I control the agenda, and we're really supposed to be sticking to the agenda. As I said, I'm more than glad to give you a bit of latitude, but I just am kind of giving you a little bit of a fair warning not to go too far astray.
Within respect, in regards to the open meeting law, I was wondering how that change came about. That's all. It's the only questions I have.
Okay, I'm not following that. So in terms of the open meeting law, I'm not sure.
Well, like I stated, some folks had some questions, myself included. I just stated the question. Within respect, I don't want to get too far into this. I don't want to, ruffle any feathers here.
No, but definitely clarify so that she can try to be responsive to you.
Very good, I will do that. According to General Law 94G, it's stated an umbrella term as establishments.
Yes.
And when we went to vote, it actually stated more specifically in regards
Retailers.
to retailers.
Yes.
And that, some folks felt they were a little misled by that. So my question was, how come it was labeled that versus under the establishments who were in verbiage?
So there are towns, I'm not really sure. I mean, it was in the Warren article as marijuana retailers. So there are towns who did total prohibitions. You can't be a cultivator, manufacturer, anything in their town. And there are towns who only wanted to deal with retail because of the in and out of the customers. So I'm not sure. I mean, the bylaw reads marijuana retailers. And I would hope that if someone had a question at town meeting, what does marijuana retailer mean? They would have stood up and asked me, because I would have told you that it was for sale to customers. And I think even at the town meeting, there was a presentation, because remember, Hanson has a long history, to the extent there can be a long history with marijuana. So I believe the prohibition failed initially at the town meeting. Then we did a zoning bylaw where we regulated all marijuana. Then we had a general bylaw on retailers, which passed. The zoning failed. And then this last time around, we did a zoning bylaw, which passed.
And I can't really say, Mr. Fletcher, but I believe that Kate was being responsive to what we had been asked as a board, which was to limit recreational marijuana, the retail sale of recreational marijuana. So I think in an attempt to be responsive, perhaps it got narrowed to that. I really can only guess at the evolution of that. I don't know, but.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, Kate, I did notice that you wanted us to review and approve the Selectmen licensure rules and regulations for marijuana cultivation, manufacturing, and testing facilities. Did everybody have an opportunity to review what Kate provided? Did anybody have any questions?
Did you want to include something about transferability here?
I would. I don't know how the others feel. How do you guys feel about it? I just feel like it's protective.
Absolutely, I wrote it down.
Okay.
Yes, that they return back to you for
Yeah.
approval of a transfer,
I
just
wouldn't
like
say
your
no,
liquor
they
license.
can't, but they definitely should come back to
We
us.
want to be part of that process.
Okay.
We don't want to just be carte blanche. Whoever wants to come in is going to be able to.
100%. I will add that.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion
So moved.
Second.
with the
amendment.
modification. Okay. All in favor? Okay.
In the application as well?
I'll entertain a
I move to-
motion.
So moved.
Matt
Second.
moved.
Second.
Second. Sorry, Matt.
That's good.
All right. All in
This is on the
favor?
application.
All in favor? Okay, great. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks, Kate.
Our next discussion is on running Corey on staff and volunteers, and I just had asked Mary to put this on our, and Kate, you may have a little role in this. I think that's why we had kind of put that next.
That's why she's back.
And then come back.
We had asked to just kind of discuss conceptually whether we should be running a Corey check on all staff and volunteers. Now, currently, our policy, can you kind of nutshell that for us, Mary?
Currently, we run queries on all the employees at Camp Kawani, at the senior center, at the library, and inspectional services who are going out to people's homes. The rest of the staff, the in-house staff, we generally do not run queries on. The police and the fire, they do their own thing.
Right.
So
And
it's a-
obviously, the schools do their own
Right,
thing.
yeah, I don't get involved in the
Yep.
schools at all. But those are the employees we usually run. I also, they aren't employees, but I do them for licensees who are coming in for liquor licenses or whatever type of license we run a query on them as well. So I don't do them annually. Once I run them, they're run, and we keep them. We could run them every 2 years once they sign the authorization. I would have to double check. Once they sign the authorization, it's good, or do we have to get them to sign on a second time?
It's good, here, should I go back here? I believe the form that you use makes it good for 2 years, and it doesn't specify the purpose. I'd have to look at that form, but typically it's good for 2 years. But if you do it without the authorization, it's super big trouble in legal terms.
Okay, but we have to get people to agree every 2 years to
Yeah.
rerun it. And what are you seeing other towns do with respect to this? Are they all over the map, or?
Yeah, they don't run it routinely like that, because what I find generally in other communities, I'm actually a labor council, so I deal with query issues more frequently in other towns. But if something happens, you become aware of it pretty quickly in these small towns. So there generally is not a need, but I do not see towns repeatedly filing query requests for their employees once active. Obviously, everyone gets queried at the outset when they're being hired, but the other thing with query, it doesn't show everything. Depending upon your job, it doesn't show everything. So teachers, first responders, they have a much deeper dive into their query history. But other employees that are in less sensitive positions, you're not going to get everything.
Okay. Did anybody have any thoughts or concerns about what our current policy is? We don't have to take a vote tonight. I just sort of wanted to get people thinking about it so that, we could decide, did we want to, modify it slightly? Are there categories of people that we don't currently have that we should include? That type of thing. Did anybody have?
Have we had an issue that we should be aware of?
I'd say we've had some fairly recent issues that have brought this to my attention. So nothing, that I think we should be necessarily discussing this evening, but I think maybe, Mary, if you could just put together a bullet of who we do currently run the
Sure,
Corys. And I know
I'll send you a copy of the Cory policy, the
great.
Cory form, the application that everyone fills out. Just for the record, all the seasonal people, even if I did them last year, if they're coming back, it's a brand-new hire, I run them again. So they're always run annually when they come through. So
Okay.
I'll give you the policy and the form that we use and who I run. Yeah.
Yes, Diane, yep.
I'm just going on the optimistic side here that we're going to be running a lot of programming and stuff up at the Cape in the future. I just want the board to consider in the future acquiring some volunteers too. Just in the future.
I mean,
We quarry volunteers in school.
yep. Yeah,
So if you're working-
I know quite a few 501c3 organizations that quarry their
you're
folks
working
too,
with
depending upon
kids
the
and-
type of information and the level of engagement with
Right.
people. It's just a prudent thing to do.
I agree.
So,
Mr. Chair.
So,
yes, ma'am.
just saying.
Sorry to cut you off, Diane. But yeah, no, I think anyone that's representing the town of Hanson, I think it's a good idea to do a Cory check. I've dealt with this at work where we're representing the Commonwealth, and if something had gone wrong, it would have been on us. And I think it's the same thing here in the town of Hanson, where whether you're a volunteer on a board or out in the field, I think it's a wise move to just make sure that we cover ourselves, so we're not being negligent and
I
saying that's
tend
okay.
to agree with you, and so what I had kind of discussed with Mary, I don't want to unduly burden her by having her, because right now, I think you're chief cook and bottle wash on this, right?
Yeah.
Is to, have her tell us what the policy is, and then maybe we could talk about how we expand it beyond what she's initially done, and whether we phase that in, or whether we just bite the bullet and do, everybody else that she hasn't done so far. But I do think, and to be honest with you, I want to have a comfort level that people that we're appointing to boards and committees, that there's nothing egregious, and I'm not looking to keep people away from the process. God knows we need more volunteers, so I'm absolutely not looking, and, and people make mistakes, and, and that type of thing. But I just want to know, I want to go in eyes wide open about what we're dealing with, so. So you'll put together the list.
Yes.
We'll take it under advisement at some point in the future. And maybe just you guys think about where you might stand.
Well,
Did you have something?
I do have one
Yeah.
question for Mary. After a volunteer at the library or the camp would fill out this query, who sees the results of the query?
That's a good question.
I see the results.
Yeah.
And
Only you.
I do not share them with anyone.
Okay.
Because you have to be, you're Cory certified to do that. I have the information. If something comes about, I can make a decision or make a recommendation to the board whether
Okay.
you want to
That's
hire
why
or
she's
not
the only
hire.
I only bring that up, Kate, because, years ago when I was running softball, I was lucky enough to have a police officer as a coach. And they were able to do the queries where no one else on the staff would know. It was just that one.
It's sort of like HIPAA, like need-to-know basis, Mary might loop me in and say, Kate, I've got this issue, I'm not sure if I should disqualify this candidate, let's talk about it, what do you think? She could loop me in, but you're not supposed to be looping, you're not gossiping, you're not disclosing, you're not doing anything, so it's like protected medical information, because it's protected criminal.
And there's a whole process. If I find something in somebody's query, I can call them in and say, look, this showed up, what's your story? We may have to disqualify you. So there's a process for Corey
And more
certified.
appropriately, really, I'm sure you weren't trying to suggest this, but the police wouldn't be able to do Corys for different organizations. Normally, you can apply as an organization to have a person who's your Cory person, like we have at the food
Well, that-
pantry.
yeah, that-
Yeah, so that would be the sustainable model going forward. If you've got a little group, you just get one person that gets Cory certified or whatever, and then you run those Corys, so, yeah.
That's what we
Yeah. Okay, great.
You can do that.
Good discussion. Okay, we're going to, in the interest of time, because it's 8:15, although we have had an extremely productive meeting, we're going to move over the selectmen's goals, which we absolutely will, I'm committed to discussing at the next meeting, because we can't move forward with them unless we actually discuss them again.
I did really look for them, though. So I just want to make sure, if anybody has the goals that we've discussed, I've got a couple sets. I had given one to Laura, and she said, I'm not sure if this is a correct one, so if there's
Looked a little
set out there,
lackadaisical.
send them to me. But as I said to Laura, tonight's, the goal for the Board of Selectmen is to get through the meeting, so
Yeah,
we'll discuss
and
it at another
also,
meeting.
in keeping with that, make sure if there's anything Mike was working on, that we give them to, those types of things to Mary, so that we can consolidate and kind of work on that. And also, any building concerns, put those together, so, because we're gonna, at some point, bring all of those to the table and discuss them. You are absolutely all set, and we really appreciate your help. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Kate. Trying to run out early, Kate?
Yep. Thank you, Kate. Okay.
With respect to the reinstatement of the license,
Yes.
it still has not been resolved, so we will leave that on the table.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Yes, and with respect to the signing the administrative professionals contract, one of their union members is at training this week, so she hasn't seen the final copy. I've discussed this with Labor Council, they're aware. Once the third member comes and they can sign, I'll put this back on the agenda for signatures on the 9th.
Okay, and vote to sign the administrative professionals contract?
Yeah, that's a contract that I was just referring to.
Table that.
The clerk,
tabling it,
the union has it.
Sorry, I was stepping 3 things ahead and I was spacing out on what you just said, sorry. Okay, next up, junk dealer's license request, Matthew Chiaramonte, and I'm sorry if I just completely mispronounced that. Is Mr. Chiaramonte here? Okay. Did you want to say a few words, or? You're not really required to, we have your application.
We have your application.
If he has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. So you're a mobile precious metals buyer?
Yeah, it's kind of an idea that I had about a month ago.
And so no walk-ins, strictly mobile. So do you actually, I'm just trying to understand your business model. You go to somebody's house and,
Right,
okay.
I'm gonna take appointments and stuff like that.
Yep.
And actually go to where they are, that kind of thing. No electronics or, power tools or anything.
And you're still subject to the same people having to disclose where they got these from and that type of thing, so that we're not aiding and abetting and all that good stuff?
IDs and, what they sell and give it to the police department, I'm not seeing like, buying a ton of stuff. I mean, I hope, but I just,
Okay, and you are, your home address is Gorham, but this is for 1,000 Main Street, and
Yeah.
did you have a used, I don't know, did you have another business there, I guess?
At 1,000 Main Street? No. I have a
Okay.
friend of mine that's over there, King's Ransom.
That's what I was thinking of,
Yeah.
okay, but different,
Yeah.
you're not
It's
affiliated?
different, no.
Okay.
I'm not affiliated with them.
Okay, did anybody have any questions for Mr. Chiamonte?
Isn't 1,000 Main Street you?
One of the main people in that carnival of people.
It is a, very
Okay.
well put, it is a carnival of people out there. All kinds of different businesses,
Like a
yeah.
gypsy
I actually
Yeah.
just had the pleasure of going in there. It's really like, you'd
Yeah,
never
yeah.
suspect it from the
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
Like, it's really cool, like, inside.
The walls are not covered with art.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
cool.
okay.
It's a really cool.
I mean covered.
Did anybody
I
have
love
any
Main Street.
questions or concerns?
I mean, everyone signed off,
Yeah.
building, police, fire.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? All right, fabulous.
Good luck.
Thank you.
We're moving on to the appointments and resignations. And we've got the resignation of Mr. Matthew Dyer from the 200th Anniversary Committee. I will accept a motion.
So moved.
With regret.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It was dramatically
And one
accepted with
abstention.
regret.
Abstaining from the resignation.
Oh, I don't want to vote for myself here.
And from the Board of Registrar, Mary Foley, 80 Indian Head Street, term to expire 6/30/22.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? And we've got an appointment to the Highway Building Committee of Michael Mean, who I believe works for Highway.
Correct.
And that's a term to expire 6/30/20.
Yeah, we're down a spot, and it just makes sense to put Mike right in there. He can jump right in.
Have we, because we have had issues, or people have commented or had issues with our lack of sort of generally publicizing openings. I just want to make sure that we're keeping ourselves honest. Do we feel as though we've given sufficient notice to the public so that nobody but Mr. Mean would apply anyway?
I didn't give any, we just had one meeting that we missed a person.
Okay. I mean, I don't, what are your thoughts on this? Do you
Well, I'm
want to
thinking-
just pump the brakes for a week or two? Is that going to kill you? Can we just, Mary, can you just kind of put it out on the website and we'll just do a little bit of, you
Sure,
know,
That's fine. With respect to the registrar, though, that goes out to, this is a vote of the Democratic Town Committee. They make a recommendation
Oh.
from their members. So I'm just backing up a little bit.
Oh,
That's the-
okay, all right.
Registrars, that's what happens with that, so it doesn't really go out to
Okay.
public. That's based on what the
No, I'm
Democratic Town
strictly
Committee-
talking
with
about the
respect
highway
to
building.
The highway
Yeah.
building, we can put that out, that we need a member.
It's fine.
Um, Okay, and then we'll just put it on our next agenda?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, all right, great, thank you, Kenny, I appreciate your flexibility on that. Annual appointments, see attached.
It's actually part of the agenda.
You know what, in the interest of time, and I'm awfully sorry to have kept you waiting for, like, you're really at the, almost the bottom of the agenda here. Can we just recategorize, we've got Calvary Baptist Church and Salvation Army request to use Town Hall Green on Saturday, August 17th from 8:30 to 2 o'clock for Family Fun Day. I think you guys will recall that they've done that several years in a row. It's very well received. Did anybody have any questions or concerns? Can I entertain a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
May I ask, I assume that all of the other expectations are in play with whatever we've done with licensures and certifications for food and things like that. Nothing changes concerning from last year.
It's always best to circle back with the Board of Health and just
Right.
double check, because I can't really speak to the health regulations, but, just check in with everybody. But I'm not aware of anything earth-shattering that would be a deal killer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, we appreciate it. Okay, back to annual appointments. And how do we handle this, Mary? It's quite overwhelming.
Welcome to the annual appointments. So we can go through them quickly. If anybody wants, I've sent these to you, you have an opportunity to look them over, right?
No, and can you just kind of level set us here so that we have an understanding of what footwork you've done, AKA attendance, willingness to serve, and I don't know if you've been able to check, I know we've had a few other things going on.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if you've had the ability to look at those things, but if you could just kind of level set, how do we know that these people are in fact wanting to serve?
I actually sent an email out, I actually had an opportunity to do it last week. Sent an email out to the chairman and the various committees that these committees fall under, and asked them to check with the people who are on the list, see if they still wish to serve. There were a few people who did not make the list. They let me know that they did not want to serve. So,
What about attendance?
I asked about attendance.
Okay.
Are there any attendance issues? Does anyone not wish to serve? To please let me know. And I got a good response back from most of the people saying that the people who are there are good with the committee. I can't say I heard from, like, the Drainage Committee, which the committee doesn't meet that often.
Okay. Well, we can ask Mr. Hickey to look into those.
I know.
The attendance there.
I did, you can't see it on the orange paper, but I did have under the economic target area committee, Laurie Muncy was still listed, that it was highlighted on the sheets, though. So I'm assuming we should see if Deb would serve as the town planner.
Definitely. I mean, she's already quite energetic and
Yes,
looking
she
at all
is.
kinds of
Yes, she is.
things. Okay, so is there any other substitute that you're looking to make there?
I don't think so. And you see that in many cases, your names are still on here. I didn't want to go through the list, pull you off, and then you say, I'm not on the list, so I just left everybody. I know we did our appointments last week.
Yep.
But I left everybody as is.
Okay, so I will, Mr. Hickey.
No, I'm sorry, Laura. I am down a committee member on the Odom Pond Committee, which the member was the past town administrator.
That's also true of the TIF committee.
In every instance where that is the case, I would assume you would be our replacement member, particularly for economic development, which I know is a actual town administrator committee.
Correct.
So you.
Correct.
Okay. So I think so when we move this, we would want to, in lieu of anywhere where we have Mr. McHugh's name, we would put in Mrs. Marini's name. And then I think you're suggesting that in lieu of Laurie Muncy, we have Deb Petty.
Right.
Are there any other similar types of modifications?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so,
Nobody contacted me for the cultural council. I was going to participate again.
So-
I'm sorry, I said, you're not gonna participate again? Because I sent it to Betty. I sent the request.
She's not she wasn't in charge of the group.
Oh, and because Becky was the chairman, right?
Right.
And she told me she didn't want to participate, so I didn't send the list to her because she's already off the list.
Okay.
So that was my bad. I sent it to Betty.
That's all right.
all right, so we'll eliminate Corinne Cafardo. You're doing enough for the town already, Corinne, you don't need to feel guilty.
I don't feel
So we
guilty.
we appreciate that. Any other, yes, Mr. Down.
So one thing that we kind of alluded to earlier on in the meeting was to kind of talk about the direction of recreation.
Yes.
And I think before we reappoint people to it, I think we should have our expectations realigned and our outlook for it, just to make sure that they're willing to be a part of, if there is a bigger picture other than Camp Kiwanis.
May I sort of modify where you're going?
Sure.
I don't think we want to be in a position where we're not reappointing these guys to the committee. So I would be willing to entertain a motion to have the appointment be less than the 3 years so that we could address what you're saying. Conversely, I think, do we have them all here right now?
All but one.
I mean, we could certainly ask, well, Mr. Smith, where did he go?
He left.
Okay.
He was sitting.
I mean, I think, so, I mean, we could say year and a half. I don't know how long it's gonna take us to have that conversation, but we could certainly do a more abbreviated, expiration date.
I'm not sure what the advantage of doing that would be.
Well, all I'm saying
He's
is,
saying
if we want to change the mission of recreation, and someone doesn't really, I mean, they could always resign, that's one option too. But I'm just thinking if we
That's a good
want
point.
if we want to expand our scope for recreation just to be beyond Camp Kiwanis and do recreation all throughout the town, and they don't know what they're necessarily signing up for, but,
They could just resign.
Right, so.
I mean, they're free agents,
Right.
I mean.
I just wouldn't want to
Literally
ruffle
free
the
agents.
feathers. I mean, they're
Yeah.
already volunteers and
Yes, Mr.
I
Frazetta.
don't see, I'm sorry, Brian Frazetta, I'm on the rec com. I don't see the point in that. Again, if I didn't want to be there, I wouldn't be. And if you
If we
say,
change-
look, I expand it, I don't want to be there, I'm just going to leave.
Okay,
You
yeah.
know, the right way.
I know where you're going, though. We don't, I think we just don't want to change the rules midstream and say, thanks for signing up for something completely different, but we've
But
changed
you
the
have
scope.
the whole com, but
You're right,
it has a different
yeah.
date, so-
And honestly, Matt, we're going to also involve them in it, because it's not going to be unilaterally us deciding to completely change the direction. We're going to talk about, it may very well be that those guys all stay in place, but they're part of our Camp Kiwanis group, and we have some other group.
Sure.
I don't really know what direction that's going to end up taking, because we haven't discussed it, but,
or we
okay.
could just not appoint Brian at all.
I got room on the drainage committee.
And Oldham Pond, apparently. No, you don't have Oldham Pond. Okay, so I will entertain a motion being mindful of the fact that we're replacing Lori Muncy with Deb Petty, and we're replacing Mr. McHugh's name with Mrs. Marini's name, and we are removing Corinne Cafardo from the Cultural Council.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, great, thank you. Moving right along.
Yeah, her
Just to
formal
formalize
resignation.
it, that would be,
No, she
You're
doesn't have,
okay?
it. She made it,
Okay.
she doesn't want to be reappointed, and
okay,
now you're not.
okay. Okay, and Harbor to Bay Bike Event, September 14th. Did everybody have a chance to review that? No, we didn't do the bike day. We did Calvary Baptist. We'll entertain a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? You guys are very motivated because we're getting to the end here. Old business, vote for a decision on 248 East Washington Street, and if you will recall, that's the one we had the little disconnect. We just, out of an abundance of caution, wanted to
Matt wanted to
revisit.
double check the address, which I give you.
Yep. I will entertain a motion.
There is a motion in your packets.
Is there?
Yes.
So, because we're gonna move forward with the building commissioner's
Yes.
recommendations,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Whoever can find it first can read it.
Bam.
Oh, there you go. I move that the board find that based upon the evidence supplied by the building commissioner on June 4th, 2019, the property located on 248 East Washington Street, Hanson, is detrimental to the public good, and accordingly that the board issue a corresponding written determination to the building commissioner and authorize the building commissioner to work with town council to remedy the situation using litigation if necessary.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Get one, Matt. Sorry.
Okay. And then we're
Mary, do
going
you need
to review and approve the FY 2020 calendar. Did anybody have any concerns?
Nope.
No.
Based on our last discussion, I plugged in some departments to
Yes, I
come in
noticed
to
that. That's
various
lovely.
meetings. They're
Yep.
highlighted. I'll probably have to tell them now. But I believe, and I highlighted the 13th of August. Now, Laura, you won't be here. Do we want to move that meeting to another week?
I mean, I would certainly appreciate it if you guys would move it. But
I'm sorry, what week?
the 13th of
13th.
August,
Are we just moving it a week back or forward?
forward.
To the 7th? 6th?
The 6th?
It's fine with me, whatever you want to do is fine.
To the, no, I'm sorry.
Because that will give us, if we move it to the 6th, we have a meeting on the 23rd, so the
I'm
next
not
week
here
will
on
be
the
the 3rd.
6th.
Oh, you won't be here on the 6th?
No.
That's right.
No,
Right, so it has to go forward to the 20th?
the
And then we'll meet
20th.
then we'll meet August 20th and August 27th. Because now we're getting into town meeting time and warrant, and closing the warrants.
Do you guys mind doing
No,
that?
so August
Okay.
20th?
Yes, thank you.
Instead
Whatever,
of the
whatever
13th.
works
I
for you,
appreciate it.
Laura.
Yep. I'll bring you back tchotchkes, under $50 worth. Okay, and, let's see.
So you want to vote to approve that, or we
We,
going to make a change?
did I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? And
Good pickup, Mary.
Mary, Town Administrator's Report?
Oh, geez, sorry, I'm typing. We had a department head meeting on June 5th with the chairman and all the department heads. It was a well-received meeting, and they appreciated her presence. It was quite informative. We requested outstanding projects that Mr. McHugh had been working on. I've had a pretty good response from everyone. I have several pages of things I need to go through. We also requested facility maintenance requests, which the library was awesome. Karen got right to me and gave me a list of things, and I had an opportunity to sit down with her and Mrs. Cafato. And I actually went up and visited the library to have a few issues that they want to address, and I'll see what I can do to get those things moving. The housing production plan has been approved. I think I sent it to you, or I put it in your boxes, so that will be moving forward, and I'm quite happy with that. There's also a letter in there from CIE, ISO. Letters. And Jerry will be, Chief Thompson will be speaking on that when he comes in with the board, but it's the insurance rating for the town has improved because of the fire safety within the community, which is a really good thing for the town. So I don't want to ruin Jerry's fun, so he can deal with that when he comes in July. The McQuon rehab, Route 14 that we're working on, the board, and I'm not sure if Matt and Wes were there when we talked about the boardwalk. Were you guys on the boardwalk?
Yes, they were here when we
Okay.
had Jim Fitzgerald came. Yep.
And apparently, we've got some information from the state indicating that it is going to be extremely expensive to do. And they're recommending a retaining wall instead. And they've gone to the Conservation Commission and they have reviewed it. So I'll make arrangements to have Jim Fitzgerald come in and go over the new design plans. But it was gonna be cost prohibitive for us to have that type of, walkway. So they'll be coming in July.
Okay.
Yesterday, we had our fire drill. I checked with the chief, and we have not had a fire drill since the last time I was interim town administrator, because that's what I do.
I wonder who ordered that fire drill.
I come from a fire department family, and since I'm in charge, we did it, and we did well. We have room for improvement, so we're gonna work on that and maybe have another one. But I sent an email to all the offices and told them what we need to do and how to improve, and we may have another one. The generator out front is just about complete. We're still waiting for the gas company to do some connections, and Bob Curran's working on that with them for me. And in order to get it up and running, we have to shut the town hall down virtually all day. And it's not gonna be on a Saturday. So I have opted for June 28th, which is a Friday, so it will affect we're only open 4 hours on Friday. It's usually a skeleton crew anyway. So in spite of the staff's insistence it be a Tuesday, I have decided it will be a Friday.
And you said you did try for the 5th of July, but that
And
was a
I
no-go.
did my very best for the
Yeah.
5th, and they're like, yeah, that's not gonna work.
Yes.
So, but we will be open on the 5th.
In keeping with the discussion about the generator,
That's on my list.
it is perhaps not as...
Aesthetically pleasing
Yes,
as one
thank
would
you.
hope, and I will be looking into getting fencing around it.
I mean, it's like have a little generator with your town hall.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
quite large, and it just sort of
like
sticks
right
out.
there.
So,
So I talked to Bob Curran. I'm gonna put some calls into a couple of fence companies to see, I had an idea of what I would expect or I was hoping for, and he suggested have them come out and give you an idea of what's probably best. I was thinking of a white vinyl fence around it, and Bob had suggested maybe a black vinyl chain link fence with shrubbery around it.
I like the idea of plantings to
Yes.
sort of, I feel like a white fence is perhaps going to add insult to injury
Right,
there.
right. Something's back there.
Yeah.
So Bob had suggested 3 feet of stone around the unit itself, and then the fence, and then the plantings around that. So
Okay. You're
we're
on it.
working on that,
Okay.
yes.
Does Iris Morway still work hard on the flowers and
Yes.
She does.
front?
She does.
I saw her a
I mean,
couple
we
weeks
might
ago.
consider, with all the work she's put in, asking her to join you and Bob Curran.
Yeah.
All right.
When we say plantings, I'm talking about shrubbery.
No, I get it,
Yeah.
but I would just suggest, after the years she's put into the appearance of town halls, plantings and so forth, she would be worth including.
Yes, I will do that. I have in your packets a disclosure on my behalf. My son actually works for one of the vendors that Whitman-Hanson Regional School District hires to do work on the schools. In my capacity as executive assistant, it didn't make any difference. I didn't have any authority to do anything other than the paperwork. So now I'm required to sign the bills that come from Whitman Hanson. I'm not signing the bills that are being paid by the vendor he works for. Whitman Hanson pays all those bills, they do all the hiring, they do the vetting of the people. They just send us a bill about that thick with invoices, and we just sign, I just would be signing as the town administrator, the total invoice to pay Whitman Hanson back. So there's my disclosure's in there, and I just need a signature. Do I need a vote on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. A vote to a vote say.
That you find that Mary's disclosure is sufficient to apprise the public, and that in fact this doesn't constitute a conflict because she's so distant from it.
I will entertain a motion.
Yep.
That's a little long-winded.
Second? Do we get a second?
Yep, you got Jim second.
All in favor? Thank you, Mary, for bringing that to our attention and disclosing.
And the other thing, final thing here is the office will be closed this Thursday. I will not be in on Thursday, but I will be back on Friday.
Okay, great, thank you. Next up on the agenda is to approve minutes. The May 21st, 2019 executive session, the June 4th, 2019.
It's just gonna be executive session. I don't have the regulars done.
Okay, executive session. And it would be Matt and Kenny, because Jim and Wes were not part of those meetings.
It's to accept and release.
So I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of May 21st and June 4th, accept and release.
So, second.
In favor? Okay, and I have a quick statement. The executive session minutes the board releases today concern a complaint the board received by Attorney Leo Peliquin against Selectmen James Hickey and Wesley Bloss relating to the town's request for proposals for labor council. The crux of the complaint is that Selectmen Hickey's and Bloss's participation in the process to select labor council violated the Massachusetts Conflict of Interest law to facilitate Attorney Peliquin's removal as labor counsel because he had investigated the Camp Kawani matter. The board retained outside counsel with expertise in conflict law issues, Brody, Hardoon, Perkins, and Keston, to conduct an investigation of the complaint. They have submitted their investigation report to the board. The report concluded that the State Ethics Commission likely would find that the selectmen's participation in the RFP process did not violate any section of the conflict law prohibiting actual conflicts of interest. The report also concluded that the Ethics Commission likely would find that the selectmen did violate the section of the conflict law prohibiting appearances of conflicts by failing to file written disclosures about their personal interests involving the Camp Kawani investigation. An executive summary of the report has been prepared. The board, with Selectmen Hickey and Bloss recused and absent from the room, voted to adopt the investigation's report's findings and conclusions. The board also voted to address the situation by requiring Selectmen Hickey and Bloss, as well as other members of the board and certain other town officials and employees, to attend training about appearances of conflict of interest and related conflict law issues. The board's votes on these matters, reflected in the executive session minutes released today, conclude the board's action on this complaint. Please note copies of the complaint, an executive summary of the investigation report, and the investigation report are available upon request to the Selectman's office. Okay, and on to one-day liquor licenses. Did somebody, I will entertain a motion, and just a reminder, we typically move these without getting into details because some of them are surprises.
I move to approve the one-day liquor licenses as printed.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. And committee reports, not much to report since the last time we met on the 200th anniversary, but we are meeting next week, and I'm sure that there will be more to report. Final Plymouth County Hospital Reuse Committee.
We've been having scheduling conflicts.
Okay. That is disappointing. McQuon School Reuse Committee, again, we don't have a lot to report there. Hoping to meet with the Keller Williams, who we've contracted with for the lease of the building. And we've gotten some feedback from some of the sports teams, local sports groups, that they're hoping that if the lease situation falls through, that we might entertain a sports complex there, which is a lot more complicated than it might appear. but we will certainly talk to them. But just as an FYI, if the lease situation with McQuon falls through, and that is if we can't find somebody who's willing to lease that building and build senior housing, then we have gotten approval at town meeting to tear the building down, and we will be able to say with all good conscience, a clear conscience, that we have tried to reuse, we have tried to lease, we have tried to sell, we have tried everything we can before tearing it down, at which point we would likely tear it down, and then we would have public meetings and open forums about how will we use this now clean footprint, similar to what we did with Plymouth County Hospital. I really like that collaborative, open session type of thing, and I think it brings out the best in everybody. So that's where we're at with that. Hanson School Repair Committee, I understand we were going to discuss that tonight, but we're going to table that because Mr. Garvey was unable to join us tonight. Highway Building Committee.
We haven't met since last time.
Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Oh, my word. All in favor?
Laura, good job.
It was a
Excellent
marathon.
job, Laura.